Hello, I'm Nikolai Warren with OrganizationDesign.net. In this video, I will briefly discuss the matrix organization and describe two more recent alternatives to the matrix. When I started out as a consultant, we used the term matrix to refer to pretty much any kind of organization with more than one dimension or with people working laterally for managers in different units inside the firm. After I had completed a few organization redesign projects and read more about the concept, I realized that the matrix model was only one of several multidimensional models and that there were some rather fundamental differences between them, although they may look fairly similar when we draw them as organization charts. The original meaning of the concept is that a matrix is an organization where employees report to more than one manager, usually two, in a so-called dual hierarchy. Now, the matrix solution is normally installed only at one or two levels of a firm, so it does not mean that everybody has two bosses, but that some people in key positions do. The first matrix organizations were formed during the late 1960s in project-based technology firms in the US. So the concept is about 40 or 45 years old now. It's not a new topic, but from the feedback I have received, it's still a concept that is receiving quite a lot of attention among managers in large firms. Almost all large firms today are multidimensional, meaning that they comprise different types of units. In the example I have created here, we have three dimensions: the internal service providers, the product units that develop and deliver products or services, and the market units that market and sell products or services. In this case, they are regional sales units. There are several differences to the traditional functional organization. First, these types of organizations are typically more decentralized with smaller units compared to the old functions. And they combine focus and leverage. You have market units that can be fairly specialized on a customer segment or region, and you combine that with the ability to leverage technologies, processes, and customer relationships across the units. So in this example, the product unit here will interface with both of the market units, and the internal service providers will serve all of the other units in the organization. Also note that these different types of units may be at the same level hierarchically in the organization. You have both internal service providers, product units, and market units at the same level and reporting to the CEO. One key argument in favor of the matrix, which I think is even more important today than 40 years ago, is that many organizations need to be able to do more than one thing well. Compare the matrix to more traditional models. In a product-based organization, you would put the product units at the top and relegate the market units to the level below. Whereas in a geographical organization, you would do the opposite with the geographical units at the top and the product units below. With these simpler models, you would have to prioritize one thing above the other. With a multidimensional organization, on the other hand, you should be able to focus on two priorities at the same time. For example, you should be able to focus equally well on product innovation or efficiency in manufacturing processes and on customer orientation or the ability to adapt to regional markets. You should also be able to create more lateral connections between people working for the different units compared to a functional organization. The main discussion has been how to link the different units up together. The key assumption behind the matrix approach was that you needed to do that by creating formal reporting lines in two or more directions. So for example, if you have a sales manager located in one of the regions that primarily sells one product. He or she would report both to a regional president, for example, and to a vice president in a product unit like this. It has been known from the start that the matrix is a challenging model to manage, particularly because of the conflicting goals and interests that people at this level have to navigate. You basically delegate downward in the organization the responsibility for making difficult trade-offs that might have been, and many people would say should have been, made at a leadership level. There are two alternative models where the linkage problem is solved in a different manner. The first is the so-called front-back model, or which you may in this case call the front-middle-back, as we have 3 dimensions in this example. Typically in the front-back model, people will be placed within one of the units, for example, like this. So you don't necessarily need to have 2 bosses. Compared to the classic matrix, you also have less overlap in goals and KPIs, because the product units may be measured primarily on cost or quality, whereas the sales units may be measured primarily on revenue. The second alternative is what I call the Modular Organization, which was proposed by Russell Ackoff, the late US professor of system sciences. He argued that there should be no need for a matrix in an organization like this, and that there instead should be customer-supplier relationships between the units. He also went one step further and proposed that the product and market units should be as small as possible in order to maximize flexibility and make it possible to add or remove units depending on the strategy and changes in the market demand for products. So with this alternative, you would place most of the people in a common resource pool on this dimension. These people will then work on projects for the product and market units, and the managers in those units will be the clients rather than the bosses of the people here. So there are really 3 different types of multidimensional organizations, and the matrix is only one of them. By being aware of the different types of models, one may be able to see more options for solving complex design challenges. I should mention here that the approach that one follows is quite important. In my experience, one of the problems of matrix structures is that they are often developed simply by drawing reporting lines between boxes. And often it's a compromise solution that is chosen when one cannot really decide where to place a role or where to locate a unit on the chart. But as a manager I once worked for used to say, the reporting structure should really be the output and not the input to a redesign process. We should try to understand what the units are supposed to do and try to define the goals and mandates and understand how they interact and possibly how they overlap. Only then should we start to reconfigure the organization and draw the formal reporting lines. If you're interested in more information about this, there's a chapter in my book with more detailed examples and suggestions for how one can develop these types of organizational models. As always, any feedback is welcome, so feel free to add a comment on the blog or send me your thoughts.